Former Defence Minister Tobias Ellwood is calling for legislation to protect MPs from protesters who target them at home. This comes after a large-scale pro-Palestinian protest at his house in Dorset last Monday and reports that Just Stop Oil activists plan to protest at MPs' houses in the run-up to the general election. More than 60 people, some holding Palestinian flags, gathered outside Mr Ellwood's home to call for a Gaza ceasefire. One of the protesters' signs had a picture of Mr Ellwood with the words "complicit in genocide" across his face. The Bournemouth East MP said the police blocked his driveway and protected the property with an armed response unit. The protesters said it was all completely legal and no arrests were made. But now Mr Ellwood is suggesting new laws should be brought in to protect MPs at home from protesters. There are concerns that Just Stop Oil plans to target them in a similar way in the run-up to the election. So maybe you agree that targeting an MP at their home is a step too far and they've got to be protected by the law because there are very real concerns. Or maybe you say, no, this is all part of democracy. You've got no problem with protesters making their point wherever they see fit, so long as it's peaceful and legal. We'd love your thoughts on this. Do email your comment and your phone number, if you don't mind, to vine@bbc.co.uk. Text us 88291 or WhatsApp us on the long number 08000 288 291. So we're speaking now to Peter Cardwell, former government special advisor, and Adrian Johnson, spokesperson for Just Stop Oil. I don't know to what extent this was an official Just Stop Oil protest, Adrian, but do you think protesting outside MPs' homes is okay?
Jeremy, thanks so much for having me on. Yes, I do think that protesting outside MPs' homes is a legitimate thing to do. By licensing new oil and gas, these politicians are allowing millions to die from the climate crisis. Of course we're knocking on their doors.
Peter Cardwell.
Absolute nonsense. MPs are people too. They have families. They have a right to privacy. They are very accessible in a way that lots of representatives from many parliaments right around the world are not. They're protected in many ways, but here in the UK, we have a system where you can make an appointment, you can talk to your MP at a constituency surgery. Their homes don't just house them as well. They house their spouses, their children, who have not chosen a career in politics and are entitled to their private life and may not even agree with what the MP says or does. I know some MPs' families where the children are basically Corbynistas, whereas their parents are Conservatives. It is outrageous. It's ridiculous. MP safety in this country. We've had Joe Cox murdered. We've had David Amos murdered. We need them to feel safe and have safe spaces. And Just Stop Oil and other organisations doing this, as well as the pro-Palestinian protesters, need to take a long, hard look at themselves and realise that, yes, they may well have a point, but any sympathy that anybody has with them will quickly evaporate when they start intimidating children.
OK. Adrian, how do you respond?
Yeah, well, the important thing to note is that we are a totally non-violent organisation. So MPs should not feel threatened about us walking up their drive and knocking on their door. I mean, for goodness sake,
just to say that it's not so much. Hang on, Adrian. It's not. I just want to ask you a question. It's not so much about you may be non-violent, but they don't know, and maybe their teenage daughter, son, does become a bit anxious about it.
It is absolutely clear that Just Stop Oil is a non-violent organisation, and we would not want to intimidate people or harass people. And again, I just put it to you, MPs visit my home, they come along, they knock on the door, I have a talk with them. That's what we're talking about here.
But how many MPs have done that? How many MPs have actually done that, have knocked the door? I mean, there are people, MPs are really, really accessible. You can talk to them at their constituency surgeries. You can go and talk to them in Parliament. You can email them. They are accessible. Leave them alone in their own homes.
Yeah, well, I'd like to say to you, Peter, that most of the activities that we are planning, they're mostly going to be taking place at the offices of MPs. It is possible, though, that people may gather outside the homes of their MPs to demonstrate when we believe that the MPs are failing to keep us safe.
So, Peter, that's the issue here, is that, Peter, the issue is for Adrian, this is an absolutely outstanding issue they're campaigning on. There's nothing like the end of the world. That's literally what they're campaigning on.
Well, listen, you may feel it's the end of the world, but people who have sympathy with your cause, that is going to evaporate. They're not going to have sympathy the very first time they see a child or a teenager or even just a spouse of one of these MPs feeling intimidated. You may say, oh no, we're perfectly peaceful and we're not intimidating. Try having 30, 40 people turning up on your doorstep. You're going to feel intimidated. You're going to feel as if this is a real threat to you. And there are enough threats out there. There are a lot of MPs who have to talk to the police a lot about the threats that are happening to them. You may not feel as if you're being threatening, but that will be how it is felt, not just by MPs, but as I say, by members of their household who have not chosen a career in politics, who you are intimidating.
Adrian, what do you think MPs should do in response to these protests? If Just Stop Oil turn up outside their house, what are you expecting?
We are expecting and we're fully hoping that they will engage with us, that they will listen to us. We're talking about, as you've said yourself, Jeremy, an unprecedented situation. The day that Labour announced that they were going to row back on the 28 billion funding for the green investment, that was exactly the same day that it was confirmed that for 12 months we've had over 1.5 degrees Celsius of heating. That might not sound much, but it's only going to increase as we continue to burn oil and gas and open up new oil fields. And when it hits 2 degrees Celsius, which it is expected to do this year, that will mean that 1 billion people on the planet can no longer sustain themselves in where they are currently living. That means we're going to have 1 billion people on the move.
Have you found MPs who don't agree with that, what you just said?
We have found that MPs are talking about continuing to fund and open new licences, 100 new oil and gas licences at a time that it's not us that are saying that that's wrong, it's the scientists, the world's scientists are saying since 2021, the International Energy Agency are saying there can be no new oil and gas. It is not the right time to be opening new oil and gas. Now, they might agree that we have a crisis, but they are not answering that, are they? They're not behaving in the way that is going to be effective in reversing or reverting or stopping the crisis.
It may be a sign, this, Peter Cardwell, of just the way that politicians do feel so cut off from their electorate now.
Well, listen, I think in our system, I think there is a problem with MPs feeling cut off from their electorate, but also they are accessible. You can talk to them, you can email them, you can go to their constituency surgeries. Also, I think that the way you get things done in this country is by persuading people. There are lots of organisations that do great things to persuade people to do things. Just Stop Oil are a ridiculous organisation that are planning on intimidating MPs and their families. Whether they want to or not, they will feel intimidated. I'm not even going to engage with some of the outlandish claims that have just been made there, because to me this isn't a climate debate. This is about public safety. It's about the safety of our public representatives. We've got an election coming up. Who on earth is going to stand for Parliament? Who are the good people out there who would like to get involved with politics but won't stand for political office because they fear not just every single thing they've ever put online, everything they've ever done will be brought back to haunt them, but even now their families are being targeted by Just Stop Oil and other organisations. It's ridiculous. We won't get good people standing for Parliament. We'll get worse politicians, will get worse government in this country. That is what's going to happen. And Just Stop Oil and organisations who do this to MPs' homes are directly responsible for that.
Adrian Johnson.
Yeah, well, Peter, you're absolutely right. It is all about persuading people, and it's all about meeting with people. And this is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about engaging with our MPs. The processes that you've outlined, Peter, we've all been doing that for 30 years or more. We've consistently been emailing, talking to our MPs. This is just a continuation of that. And just to reiterate, we are a totally non-violent organisation.
You said that. And, yeah.
And but it's so important because
you can still cause worry.
We do not seek to cause worry, and I don't believe that this will.
Okay, thank you so much.
We will in a very, very planned way that it will not cause distress.
Adrian Johnson, spokesperson for Just Stop Oil, and Peter Cardwell, former government special advisor. MP saying, look, because of what happened outside his house in Dorset, because there was a protest about Gaza, actually, in this case, that we need a law to stop protesters gathering outside the homes of MPs. While we think about that, let's have another listen to Paloma Faith from yesterday's brilliant piano room. This is Talking About a Revolution.
Don't you know, talking about a revolution sounds like a whisper. Don't you know, talking about a revolution sounds like a whisper. While they're standing in the welfare lines, crying at the doorsteps of these armies of salvation, wasting time in
So Paloma